President Biden touring the collapsed Baltimore bridge as he asks the federal government to foot the entire bill for rebuilding it. Republicans saying there must be limits. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more from Dundalk, Maryland, where President Biden spoke this afternoon.
Taking an aerial tour of the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge, President Biden vowing full support in rebuilding it and reopening the critical port of Baltimore.
I'm here to say your nation has your back, and I mean it. Your nation has your back.
And Biden also met with the families of the 6 construction workers who died during the collapse last Tuesday.
And our hearts are still breaking.
And Biden's visit comes as the White House on Friday asked Congress to approve an 100% federal cost share for rebuilding the bridge. And while Biden says he wants responsible parties to pay as well, he also vowed,
I fully intend, as the governor knows, to have the federal government cover the cost of building this entire bridge, all of it, all of it.
$60 million have already been approved as emergency funding to help clean the wreckage, but rebuilding the whole bridge could take years and billions of dollars. On Friday, Republicans from the House Freedom Caucus demanded limits to how taxpayer money would be spent on it. They say the U.S. must first make the foreign shipping company involved in the collision pay as much as they can, and then for any federal spending on this bridge, it needs to be offset by spending cuts elsewhere. They're also demanding that the Biden administration lift its pause on LNG exports. So now the questions are when and how Congress would actually consider funding for the bridge and what that exact dollar amount will be. Reporting in Baltimore, Maryland, Iris Howe, NTD News.
An earthquake rattling New Jersey, sending shockwaves across the eastern seaboard. Reports now saying tens of millions of people feeling the tremor earlier this morning. NTD's David Lamb is in New York City with more on this story.
On Friday, a brief and abrupt earthquake rattled New Jersey and parts of New York. This footage shows a dog enjoying a sunbath on the windowsill until a tremor sent him on high alert. Elsewhere in this house, frames were seen shivering as items took a plunge off the shelf. And a brief jittery moment inside this coffee shop. Preliminary reports indicate it was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, it took place before 10:30 a.m. near Lebanon, New Jersey, just 50 miles west of New York City. But more than 42 million people reportedly felt it across the eastern seaboard, reaching from the Big Apple all the way down to Washington, D.C. I'm here in New York City, which is about 45 miles east of the epicenter of the earthquake. Now, I spoke to some folks and they said some people felt it, some didn't, but here are their reactions.
Yeah, my foreman said, do you feel that? I'm like, feel what? You know, because we're working construction. Usually this thing's moving, people vibrating, and we didn't feel it. And then all of a sudden I started getting text messages from people in South Carolina.
It was the sound and it was just a shake, you know, not like that anything wasn't moving, but it was just kind of shaking.
I was sitting on the sofa and the whole wall bent, like quivered, and I went with it. And I actually thought it was like a trolley going past the lights were shaking and the screen was shaking, we were shaking.
Officials said so far there's no major damage or injuries, but they urged residents to stay alarmed.
Earthquakes don't happen every day in New York, so this can be extremely traumatic. We know how this can impact you, but we're ready for the unexpected. This is New York City, and we respond accordingly.
We are going to be reviewing all potentially vulnerable infrastructure sites throughout the state of New York that is critically important in the aftermath of an event like this.
The earthquake also impacted air travel. The Federal Aviation Administration said flights at the New York Kennedy, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Newark airports were put on hold while runways were inspected for possible damage. Friday's seismic activity marks the strongest in New Jersey in more than 240 years. The White House said President Biden had already spoken with New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and added the administration will provide help if needed. Reporting from New York City, David Lamb, NTD News.
Changes in Israel's war operation after pressure from President Biden. The Israeli military firing 2 officers in opening new border crossings with Gaza. NTD's Jack Bradley has more from the State Department.
Israel's military dismissed 2 of its officers today involved in recent drone strikes that mistakenly killed 7 aid workers in Gaza. These aid workers were part of World Central Kitchen. Now, the Israeli military also reprimanded 3 others involved in these drone strikes, and it released a report today stating that these officers violated rules of engagement. Secretary of State Antony Blinken received this report today.
We're reviewing it very carefully. We'll be discussing its conclusions with Israeli officials and with humanitarian organizations.
President Biden said today that Israel is responding to his request to protect civilians in Gaza. Biden warned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during a phone call that Israel must protect civilians in order for U.S. support to continue.
Did you threaten to stop military aid to Israel?
I asked them to do what they're doing.
After their call, Israel announced it will reopen a key border crossing with Gaza. It's the Erez crossing in the north. For years, people used the Erez crossing to move into and out of the Gaza Strip, but it was closed down after the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack on Israel. Israel said it will also move more aid through the Kerez Shalom border crossing in southern Israel. Blinken said the move is welcomed, but time will tell whether it's enough.
We welcome the steps that have been announced by Israel, opening Erez as a new crossing point, having shipments go directly from the Ashdod port, maximizing the route from Jordan. These are positive developments, but the real test is results, and that's what we're looking to see.
Blinken said Israel's challenge is to protect civilians while at the same time eradicating Hamas, who embed themselves among civilians in schools, apartments, and hospitals. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The latest job report exceeding expectations, the United States economy adding over 300,000 jobs last month as unemployment dropped to 3.8%. It's according to a new report from the Labor Department. The American labor market has remained stable for months amid high inflation and a round of interest rate hikes from the Federal Reserve. Economists had expected a slowing job market, but March showed the 39th consecutive month of job growth. The unemployment rate has also been below 4% for 26 months in a row. That's the longest streak since the late 1960s. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.